What the heck is Pitt doing in Colorado? Colorado? Who was the last Pitt player to come from Colorado? You have any idea? I don't. Maybe you do. Maybe I'll have to look that up. But in the last week, we've seen new Pitt tight ends coach Jacob Bronowski out recruiting in Colorado, out recruiting in California, out recruiting in Texas. 3 states that over the course of the last almost 10 years have sent exactly 8 players to Pitt, which seems like more than I would have imagined, actually. Listen, we got to talk about recruiting footprint, recruiting geography, where Pitt is recruiting, where they should be recruiting, and whether they should be recruiting more at home, or maybe part of the problem is the recruiting issues at home, and that's why they're finding themselves in places like Colorado. All right, let's talk about recruiting here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, the answer to the trivia question is Dominic Williams. Do you remember Dom Williams, offensive lineman? He played at Pitt 2005 to 2008 or so, somewhere around there, 2004 to 2008. I think he redshirted in 2004 and was on the team through 2008. So he was right there in that transition from Walt Harris to Dave Wanstead. He was part of that last full recruiting class that Walt Harris signed at Pitt, and he was from Colorado. In the history of the Rivals.com database, that's the only guy Pitt has signed from Colorado. So what was Pitt doing recruiting in Colorado last week? We got some thoughts. Here on the Morning Pitt. It is Wednesday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we do all of this Pitt video content all day, or not all day, every day. That's what we say about the message boards. I'm mixing up my reads again. Morning Pitt. Every day of the week, Monday through Friday, we get together every morning to talk a little bit of Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting. We talk about it all right here on the Morning Pitt. Whatever's going on in the world of Pitt, we talk about it. And then, of course, we do other things here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com as well. We have a live stream, a weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday night, except this one. We're going to do it tomorrow night due to the basketball game tonight. We'll do that at 8 p.m., and it'll be right here. Me and Jim Hammett will hang out with you. You can join in the conversation with your comments and your questions. We'll do the same thing on post-game shows after every road basketball game. We are live right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com to talk about what happened in the Hoops game. It's always a lot of fun to do those. And then we have post-game shows during the football season, interviews, podcasts, all kinds of things right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss any of it. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, the website Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all of the Pitt sports news. Football, basketball, and recruiting. It's all right here, right there at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to talk to other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the website. There is a Pitt basketball game tonight. Panthers take on Wake Forest at the Peterson Event Center. Big game. Another opportunity for Pitt to get a win. Another opportunity for Pitt to try to stack some wins here. Last-ditch effort possibly to build that NCAA tournament resume. Like we talked about yesterday, though, it might be kind of like it was in the Miami game, too little and too late. We'll certainly talk a lot about that after, on tomorrow's Morning Pitt after the game. And we'll have lots of coverage from the game. We'll have Jeff Capel's post-game press conference and everything else like that. So you want to tune in right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for coverage of that Pitt basketball game. But I want to talk recruiting for a little bit because, like I say, Jacob Bronowski, the new tight ends coach, was out. They're all out on the road right now. But Bronowski spent a lot of time over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, in Colorado. He was in California for a few days, and he's been in Texas kind of running all over the place, offering guys all over the state. It's a big state, and Bronowski's offering a lot of guys in the state. And these are 3 areas that Pitt doesn't typically recruit. Like I said, in the history of the Rivals era, going back to about 2002 or so, Pitt has signed 1 player from the state of Colorado. Pat Narduzzi has gotten a variety of guys out of California and Texas, 4 from California, 4 from Texas. Since the 2016 recruiting class, so you're looking at about 8 recruiting classes, 8 guys, averaging 1 California or Texas guy per year. It didn't exactly work out like that. They got 2 in the 2023 recruiting class, Israel Polk and Ty Diefenbach. So, and the 1 year they got, it was probably 2022, they got 2 guys from Texas, Che Wabuko and Marquand Pope. And so yeah, they've gotten 8 guys from California and Texas over the last 8 recruiting classes, but, well, I guess 9 recruiting classes, 2016 through 2024. So they've gotten 8 over the course of those 9 recruiting classes, but the reality is they've had a couple years where they've stacked guys. You know what I mean? Half of those guys signed in 22 and 23. And I don't necessarily think it means they're making inroads in those states, but there is a question of the effort that you put in to go to those states, to visit those schools, to offer those kids, if you're highly unlikely to ever produce anything. Look, the vast majority of Pitt's roster, since Panther-Lair has arrived, and I think you could probably, I cut off the research at the 2016 recruiting class. You could probably dig back further and get back into the early 2000s or into the 1990s and find similar numbers. But the vast majority of the players who have joined Pitt's roster over the last 9 years have been from Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio. Pennsylvania, 41 guys signed with Pitt from the state of Pennsylvania since the 2016 recruiting class. 41. 40 guys signed with Pitt from the state of Florida over the last 9 years. So 41 guys from Pennsylvania, 40 from Florida. That's 80 guys over the course of 9 years. 81 guys over the course of 9 years. That's the bulk of your roster. It may not be the majority, but it is the bulk of your roster. Actually, it probably is the majority of your roster is coming from Pennsylvania or Florida. After that, Ohio. Pitt has signed 20 players from the state of Ohio over the course of the last 9 recruiting classes, 14 from New Jersey. And you get down to Maryland and Virginia, 10 each, 9 from Georgia, which is a little bit of a bit of a more recent development. All 9 of them have signed since the class of 2020. They signed 3 that year, and then 2-1 after that. And New Jersey has those heavy numbers. Like I said, they've signed 14 from the state of New Jersey, but they've only signed 4 over the past 5 recruiting classes. 2016, 17, 18, 19 produced 10 out of those 14 that we're talking about. And so a little bit of a shift there, and that's been interesting to see that Pitt, I think they're still offering a lot of guys in New Jersey. They're just not having quite as much success getting guys from New Jersey for whatever reason. And I think there's probably a variety of reasons, ranging from everything from, more schools getting involved there to something like Jeff Hafley becoming the head coach at Boston College, where I think has probably helped the Eagles' efforts in New Jersey. But really the steady ones have been Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio. And that's and kind of in that order, with PA and Florida being pretty similar. You have a down year here or there. Incidentally, the 2022 recruiting class, Penn only signed 1 player from PA, 1 player from Florida. But everything else is big numbers, as you would probably expect. But the curious thing, and I think we all sort of recognize this and we all know this, you're not going to be surprised by this when I say it, but the curious thing is, despite the volume of players from the state of Pennsylvania joining Pitt's roster over the last 9 years, it hasn't necessarily translated into being the main producers on Pitt's roster over the last 9 years. I mean, you look at Panther-Lair. Panther-Lair has had 1 starting quarterback from the state of Pennsylvania. Well, 2, I guess. If you got to include Phil Dracovic. I kind of blocked that one out a little bit. But 2 starting quarterbacks from the state of Pennsylvania. Dracovic for a few games this year, Ben DiNucci for a few games in 2017. And there was really a long run of starting quarterbacks from the state of Pennsylvania at Pitt prior to that, culminating with up until Tom Savage in 2013. It was pretty much from Rod Rutherford all the way through. It was all Western PA guys, or all PA guys, I should say. But under Narduzzi, there's only been 2, and they were only for a handful of games each. At running back, Narduzzi has had, I think, one running back from the state of Pennsylvania as the leading rusher, James Conner, in 2016. At wide receiver, he's had 1 wide receiver from the state of Pennsylvania as the leading rusher. That was Tyler Boyd in 2015. It's out-of-state players who are making the biggest plays. I mean, you can run down the list of guys like Kenny Pickett Izzy Abanikanda, Jordan Addison, Jared Wayne, Brian O'Neill, Kalijah Cansey, Quadri Olison, Darren Hall, Dion Lewis. I mean, not Lewis, but I mean, sticking under Narduzzi. Sorry, I was making a list of just guys who have led Pitt in rushing, receiving, or passing basically since the year 2000, and Lewis obviously would be on that list. Servassier Dennis. You can run down the list of guys who have been productive, who have excelled in this defense, Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver. I mean, they're all out-of-state guys, almost all, with the rare exception of, like I say, Connor, Boyd for 1 year each. And then occasionally you'll have some productive or standout defensive players. I mean, MJ Devonshire obviously was very good. Donovan McMillan looks like he's going to be very good. Javon McIntyre, another in-state player who has excelled and done well. A handful of those offensive linemen, Cradle and Blake Zabovic. Before that, I think Dorian Johnson played for Pat Narduzzi for 2 years. Adam Bizavati was on those early teams. And that's the other interesting thing is that you see a lot of these, when I talk about Connor, Boyd, Bizavati, Johnson, we're talking early Narduzzi tenure, early Narduzzi era. Same thing with Ben DiNucci. We're talking the first 2 or 3 years of Narduzzi's era. And since then, you've seen this shift away. Intentional or otherwise, you've seen this shift away from in-state products to more out-of-state guys contributing and really leading the team. I think there's a variety of reasons for that. Not the least of which, well, it sort of goes hand in hand. Reason one sort of has two parts to it, and it's part 1A and 1B, and they sort of go hand in hand to some extent. For the most part, talent continues to decrease in Western Pennsylvania, and it doesn't mean that there are no talented players in Western Pennsylvania. It means that there just aren't as many of them as there used to be. You can tie that to overall population, declines. You can tie that to shifting interests in sports and different sports on the rise or whatever. There's just not as many talented football players in Western Pennsylvania as there once was. And maybe, 20 years ago, maybe we were overrating guys in Western Pennsylvania anyway. Maybe we were ranking those guys too high to begin with. And so they weren't all that good to begin, at the start. I don't know if that's entirely true. There's probably a little bit of truth to that. It's probably an element, but it's not the entire story. The bigger story is that I think there are fewer, and you can look in the state-by-state rankings, year by year of the Pennsylvania state rankings on Rivals and any of these networks, and you'll see the dwindling numbers, whereas maybe there used to be 9 to 12 4-stars, or in the state of Pennsylvania for any given recruiting class, maybe that number is now down to 6 to 8 or 5 to 8 or something like that, where you could pretty much count on having at least one 5-star in the state of Pennsylvania every year. Now that's not such a lock. You have years where you don't have those 5-star guys, and that's in the entire state. And then when you narrow it down to the western side of the state, to Western Pennsylvania and the WPIAL and the City League, it's even more pronounced. Those numbers continue to dwindle. Now that's 1A. 1B that goes along with that is that the guys that are here, Pitt's missing on most of them. And I mean, if I've said this once, I've said this a million times. There was never a point, at least not this century, where Pitt got everybody from Western Pennsylvania. We live in this, we live under the illusion or the myth that Dave Wanstead built a wall around Western PA and never let anybody out. I mean, but that's just not true. You can look year by year and find guys who got away, talented, coveted players, sometimes the best guys in Western PA, and they didn't stay home. So not even Dave Wanstead was able to, dominate in that fashion. Wanstead took bigger numbers from Western PA, but it's debatable if some of those guys that he took that filled out the numbers should have been takes in the first place, or if they were, MAC level recruits. But I digress. Pitt has never gotten everybody from Western Pennsylvania, but they've always gotten some. In the last 9 years, the numbers of what constitutes those some has dwindled. So there's fewer guys available, fewer guys that you would want to get out of Western Pennsylvania over the last 10 years. And at the same time, Pitt's getting fewer of those guys who are available. And there's some years where it's really bad, like a 2017 where they missed on virtually everybody. And there are some years where they do a little bit better. I mean, when they landed who was it? Elliott Donald and Nakai Johnson and Dorian Ford and all of those guys the year after getting Deion Hayes. Well, they seemed like they were doing really well. That was a really good class for Pitt to pull in. They had a great recruiting run there. More often than not, though, they're missing on guys. And if you even look ahead to this 2025 recruiting class, the guys who are juniors right now, who really where all the recruiting focus is, because you're pretty much done with the 2024 guys at this point. I think Pitt has offered 7 recruits in Western PA right now in the 2025 recruiting class, and I can't say that they stand out as a favorite for any of them. If you told me I had to go over under 2.5 on those 7 that Pitt lands, I would probably go under. 2 of the 7, Tyke Hayes, running back from Aliquippa, and Brady O'Hara, the tight end from North Catholic, are already committed to Penn State. Deshaun Burnett, the big linebacker from Monty Christian, and Alex Tash, I think another linebackerish player from Latrobe, and Bradley Gompers, and Antoine Black, and Jaden Brown-Demery. I just don't know. I just don't see any strong leans in that group. And I say, I don't know who they're going to get out of this area. And so you can't build your recruiting class on 7 guys anyway. And if you're not even going to get all 7 or even 5 or maybe even 4 or 3, then you're really sort of stuck, and you have to put in the effort locally. You have to be at the high schools. You have to visit with all those people. You have to maintain those connections. But when it comes to filling out your class, you're going to be going out of state for it. And that's what Pitt has had to do. That's what they have done. Last year was a stronger year in Pennsylvania for Pitt. They were able to sign 7 guys. That's the most they've signed from the state of Pennsylvania since 2016. But that was after signing 3 the previous year and 1 the year before that. They're going to have to go out of state. They're going to have to, and actually, I could say it a different way. They're going to have to continue going out of state. Now, are they going to go build their recruiting class full of kids from Colorado, California, and Texas? Probably not. But here's the other angle. As someone pointed out, Pitt offered a 4-star a linebacker from Texas, I think. Big offer sheet, and we were talking about it on the message boards. And somebody said, and I think the initial response was, well, Pitt's never going to get this kid. What a waste of time. But as someone, I forget who on the boards pointed it out, and if this was you, kudos to you. But as someone pointed out, you go into the high school right now, you offer this kid, I forget his name. I think his last name was Morgan or something like that. But you go into the high school and you offer this kid, you are, making an effort, making an attempt. You hope you can start building a relationship. You can stay in touch with him. Maybe you can even get an official visit out of it. Probably not, but maybe. However, if you can build a relationship and get a little bit of a connection there, get some name recognition, some, face recognition, a little familiarity, and if by chance in 2 or 3 years that kid decides he wants to transfer from whatever school he ends up at, maybe that relationship pays off for you and you're able to get him the second time around. And that's not just a wild, crazy hypothetical. Nick James and David Ojebwe both relayed similar stories about why they picked Pitt coming out of the transfer portal. James, defensive tackle coming from Indiana. Ojebwe, a defensive end coming from Clemson. And they both said part of the reason they were attracted to Pitt, part of the reason they looked at Pitt, part of the reason they were interested in Pitt when they went into the portal is that they had relationships with Charlie Partridge from when they were getting recruited out of high school. And Pitt became sort of a natural, obvious option pretty quickly after they went into the portal because of that existing relationship. And so there's value in going to some of these far-flung places, be it Colorado, California, or Texas. Even if you're not going to get anybody out of those places right now, you can you can plant some seeds and make some connections that potentially could pay off for you down the road. So, I think going forward, when you talk about Pitt recruiting, it's going to continue. They'll still take a lot of guys from Pennsylvania, but it's not something they can rely on as the foundation of their class. I'm not sure any state really can provide the foundation of their classes. So they're going to have to get guys from Pennsylvania, but they're going to have to continue recruiting hard in Florida and Ohio and New Jersey. I think you could step the efforts back up there, the DMV area, down through the 757 and Tidewater area. And then you want to go out to Colorado, you want to go out to California, you want to go out to Texas, go ahead, enjoy your trip, but try to form some bonds in case a few years from now you get another shot at that kid. We'll see. All right, Pitt basketball tonight, Wake Forest at the Peterson Event Center. We will talk about that tomorrow on the Morning Pitt. We also have Jeff Capel's post-game press conference. We'll hear from Pitt players after the game. And, potentially Steve Forbes. We'll see if he comes in. The visiting coaches they usually come into the press conference room, but it's not 100%. So hopefully he does, and we'll have coverage of that as well, all right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you don't miss out on anything we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Lots of coverage to get you ready for Pitt Wake Forest. Lots of coverage of Pitt recruiting and everything else going on in the world of Pitt sports. Right here right there at Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you have a great Wednesday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow to talk about the game right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.